something?
No.
It's 6 p.m. I'd like to call the regular Planning Commission meeting of June 14th to order. Clerk, please take roll.
Commissioner Seals?
Present.
Commissioner Sajel?
Present.
Commissioner Burney?
Here.
Commissioner Bushnell?
Here. Commissioner Seals, can you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? And down the road.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Does the commission have any adjustments to tonight's meeting agenda? If the commission would like to discuss anything under the consent agenda, such as minutes, they will need to be pulled out and put under new business at this time. Hearing no changes to the agenda will stand as presented. Move to reports. Do we have a report from the City Deputy Administrator?
Yeah.
Resounding yes.
I don't know where we start, but just a quick little recap. We've got about 2,600 businesses in the city and that are working within the city. And so far, the real estate industry is our top. So that's Internet Retail's right behind it, about 213 or so. We've been out talking to a lot of small businesses. One for the July parade to see if they want to participate in it, but also asking them kind of what the pain points are, and they're all saying transportation by far. Last year at this time it was about 16% of their cost of goods. Now it's 39%, and they've all been encouraged to get their inventory for Christmas because of potential diesel shortages on the East Coast for some of the vendors. That's kind of new information. That was 6 or 7 retailers that I talked to. We've been doing some tours at the airport. We brought a number of people out there to look at the airport, including MEA, to talk about power and what that cost would look like, and potential people who are interested in the real estate out there. You also might be hearing about SB 9, the legislation for alcohol licensing. That's a piece of legislation that is now law, and they're going to have a kickoff. The governor and some of the legislators are having a kickoff at O'Malley on the Green this week. If you don't have anything else to do on Thursday, let me know and you can go. But primarily in the next 2 weeks, they're going to offer some training for cities of how we go through the petition process. We've had a couple breweries call us. They're pretty excited about it. So we're going to try to keep them in the loop. Other than that, we are also hosting on the 24th of June, thanks to planning, we're going to do a lunch and learn for our downtown businesses. These are for any business within this boundary. To really talk to them about the couplet status, where are they at with that, as well as downtown parking study, and really get that dialogue going, because we do have a plan for downtown, but we've been a little silent. So anyway, you guys feel free to join us for a lunch and learn about downtown. And the last thing I just want to say is we had the first landscaping committee review meeting. Was it yesterday? And it was really good. There was a lot of good dialogue and a lot of good perspectives. So thank you guys for pushing that through to council and getting results.
Thank you very much. City Attorney, are you on the line?
I am. I have nothing to report this evening.
Good thing. Sir. City Planner.
Just to piggyback on what Crystal mentioned about the landscape committee, they did meet last night. Seems like we have a good group of people. I don't know if you're familiar with them, but Dr. Chris Larson has an office on Bogart. He's on it. We have Misty Holler as that citizen representative. We have 2 architects, one from the Boutte Company and one from Architects Alaska, and then 2 landscape architects, both from Corpus Design. So they've already established themselves with,
Were you able to get a landscape, somebody that actually worked?
no, no looking forward to that. So we do not have that piece. So, yeah, I mean, maybe they can do some outreach, you know, if they know some people. They may have information that is provided to them, but not an appointed committee member. They will be meeting monthly. They've set up tentative dates for the next 6 months. They're meeting on the second Monday from 5 to 6:30. We will post news stories on the city's webpage, and there's a link so that you can tag in through Microsoft Teams and be live streamed through that, or you can access it. There's a public comment portion at the end after they come out of committee of the whole. So if anyone wants to do it, we're gonna find a way to post those meetings. They're all recorded and they will be available online too. So if you guys want sneak peeks as to what's happening, or if you're bored on Monday nights, or afternoon, you can listen in. But they had a lot of good dialogue, a lot of interesting things. So lots of information out of this group.
Okay, good. Anything else?
No, that's all I have. Thanks.
All righty. At this point in time, anyone wishing to step forward and discuss anything not on the agenda tonight can do so. Please write your name and contact information on the sign-up sheet and state your name for the record. No one present. The next item of business is the consent agenda. I'd like a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Seals makes a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Sajal seconds.
Are there any objections? If there are no objections, the consent agenda is approved as presented. New business is committee of the whole. So we're going to start with the downtown overlay. I need a motion to enter into the committee of the whole to discuss the downtown overlay parking.
Commissioner Sajal make a motion we enter committee of the whole.
Commissioner Seals seconds.
All right, we've entered the committee of the whole. Mr. Crawford, do you have any comments regarding these items? Actually, first. You were with the city council before. You're familiar with the committee of the whole? Okay. Cool. We hadn't done one since you've been here, so I thought I'd ask.
So just giving you a little background, parking requirements that are in today's code are the same ones that have been on the books since at least '96, if not from the early '80s. So it's past time that they be looked at anyway. So it was on the to-do list anyway, but the downtown overlay is actually the impetus for this particular discussion that we'll be moving forward to. You have in your package, starting on page 9, you have like a little outline. I gave you the current parking standards for the city as a whole. That's what we use for the downtown overlay. Also, you have the downtown.
That's the code from 16?
Yes, from 96.
Well, the municipal code 16.
Yes, yes, chapter 16.
Chapter 16, gotcha.
So, Title 16,
Title 16.
section. And then you have the specific downtown overlay design standards. That's more the design of how the parking spaces have to look, the sizes. Downtown allows smaller spaces so that they can achieve more spaces on site because we do have smaller lots downtown. So that was something that was incorporated. You also have some maps and charts, showing some analysis, and I can walk you through that a little bit. I just was going to go over what was in your package. But I'll come back to that. Also gave you Palmer's Code, Anchorage's Code, a couple articles. Obviously, there will be many, many more articles that will come across, and languages, codes from other areas that I'll bring forward to you in future discussions. If you have any requests for some from I'll be glad. Just let me know, and I'll get them put in the package for next time. And then you have an email of property owner owns multiple properties downtown. Richard Payne. He was the one that was when he purchased the clock tower and then had a restaurant going in. There were issues with parking spaces for that particular site. So that kind of the trigger for this conversation was: should we have less parking standards? Should we have any parking requirements? Should we have more on-street parking? You know, it's just the whole gamut of conversation that'll be coming up. So what you'll see from me bringing forward to these conversations are talking points on, you know, what is an appropriate number for on-site. Some of the things we have to look forward to is future development. So if someone came in with a 2-story building or a 3-story building, the upper is residential, or upper 2 floors are residential, the bottom's commercial or office. Right now, the code says you have to provide parking for the residential use and the office use. But a lot of the downtowns are going to only requiring the parking for one of the uses because typically, especially if it's office or something like that, they're open during the day, the residential units are off-site working, their cars are gone, so they come back at night and the businesses aren't open, or at least some of them. So there's a lot of different ways to do parking than what we dealt with. There are options for payment in lieu of providing on-site parking. A lot of communities do that. They range anywhere from $1,500 to $20,000 a space. And then the city uses that money to parking lots and parking.
Oh, okay. I was reading that article about $70,000 in fees that were saved because they didn't do that. That's because the city's using that money to take care of parking within the city, correct? I mean, it's not just fees for
No, it's
filling the coffers to take care of other stuff.
correct.
Okay.
No, it's earmarked for.
They have a public transportation portion within those cities, probably people taking care of parking meters and all kinds of stuff, I would assume. It's a bigger city.
Yeah, there's
Things that we just don't have.
a lot of varieties. And then, let's see, I was gonna say, so there'll be a lot of discussion. I'll bring forward different things. It probably this isn't something that we're looking to accomplish in 2 months. We don't want to take 2 years either. But my goal is to break it down into pieces and bring you recommendation, bring you examples, the pros and the cons, that kind of thing. Obviously tonight I'm looking for some feedback from you as to ideas, what kind of information would be helpful, things like that. But obviously it needs to be updated. I'll get you the pros and cons for a lot of these too and get that to you for your consideration. And I'll just say briefly, it's real quick and easy to say downtown, oh, there's a city parking lot, there's another city parking lot right there, so why do any of us have to do that? Well, part of what's in your package, and you can pull it out if you want to, it's on page, it's the 11 by 17 pull-out, which is page 31 and 32. You have a map that's an aerial, and then on the back side you have a chart. So I'll have to double check some of these numbers. Some people may have restriped differently. We did this last year. We'll get this updated into you. So you see at the bottom, there's a potential for new parking and on-street parking of 55 spaces. And we show the required parking's 374 and 270 is only what we have on site. And then if you take in the city parking and the potential on-street, then we come out good. We're all flush. The number pretty much comes to zero. But then if you look around downtown on the aerial side, and this is all that we have time to do an analysis. So it's not even all of the downtown area within the boundary. You have that particular map as a separate handout to show you. So we were just focused in this little area right there in this corner. But there are vacant lots that can be developed. We haven't even dealt with this side of the street. So, for example, the rest of Yenlo is yet to be developed. If you say go forward with a recommendation of no parking whatsoever for any, you have to anticipate what that future development could bring. And then is there enough on-street parking? Is there enough city parking lots? I mean, when you're going through that, some of the fast and furious information that you may hear is, yeah, it's all good. And it's good for what we have today, but this isn't what we'll have in the future. So you'll have to kind of look at it from today, but also planning for the future for these build-outs and redevelopment. For example, you have this whole block here between Maine, Connecticut, Herning, and Swanson that has, 5 little small shop houses. But if that blew out and developed like the downtown overlay allows you to do, and they have no on-street parking, they could potentially probably have, they could build from sidewalk to sidewalk to sidewalk all the way around.
But under the current code, they couldn't build.
Well, they would have to deal with on-site parking.
Right,
So
which they don't have
you would
enough room.
probably
They don't have enough room on those lots. Are those the ones that Mr. Payne?
Yes.
And the real small 16, 10, or?
He still has, with the standards, he still has the potential to basically build a horseshoe. and put all the parking in the interior of that horseshoe.
But there's a, isn't there a, maybe I may think of the wrong street, isn't there a alley?
No, that one was vacated.
That's lower down.
Yeah, well, that one was vacated. So these other blocks have alleys.
Uh-huh.
His does not.
It does not, okay.
Yes, so he owns it all.
Okay.
So that gives him more potential for building parking. So again, obviously, the standards we have, I think, are way too high. I mean, I think the science, the articles, the research, everything from planning and transportation officials are coming in that the numbers that have historically been used are too high. They require, they just create these seas of asphalt that aren't ever filled except for on Black Friday. And even now with people going more to online shopping and that, you don't even see them filling up quite as much. So what is that right fix? So I'll get you a lot of research, a lot of things to consider that way as to what's that appropriate number.
Being in doing a lot of commercial stuff, one of the things that we can talk about, it kind of goes the other direction, is because it's one of the issues I have at a building. I don't have a problem finding parking for the customers. Good luck finding parking for the employees of the businesses. That's tough. And these people that don't put their cars in park when they get out of them to go in a building, it's just driving me nuts. We had 5 hits last year because people got out of their cars, not put them in park, and then left their car and it rolled.
Wow. That's a lot.
So they wanted me to put signs up. I was going to say, don't be dumb. I didn't know what to say. Yeah, but parking is. So are we looking? What's our end goal? Just we're looking at it. We know portions of it are broke or just aren't up to the times. So we're looking at something of softening it, taking some things away, but not throwing it out.
Correct. Well, I mean,
Is that from your department to us? Is that what we're trying, and we'll look at it and figure that out, or?
Yeah, no, I have it written down in my notes that I think it needs to be looked at from all the way from the no parking required at all to the most conservative, and then what's that right answer? I think there's going to be something in the middle. I don't think no works everywhere, and the reason that I say that is when you're looking to activate a downtown, one of the primary things, and Sarah and I were involved in it a couple years with the museum street party. They close off Boundary Street. We close off that city parking lot. We bring in food trucks, vendors, all of that. It's a great community event. Brings down a lot of business. I remember the first year we worked with them on it, we were writing the food truck ordinance. And so that was what spurred us to get involved from the planning standpoint, because normally we're not programming. But we were writing that and we wanted to get a survey out. Well, what better way to get a survey out to all these people coming to the event with a bunch of food trucks? See what they think. So that's what helped us draft that code. But if you say every business can utilize that city parking lot, it now takes it off the table for taking it away. Because the expectation is of that business owner, I can send my customers and my employees to park over there. When the city now takes it back for an event and activity, they're like, hey, where's my parking? I don't have any parking. So it's that balance of still having it available for that public use, that community event, but is there some portion that can be used? So I know Commissioner Burney probably has more information on this than I do. Crazy Moose has leased from the city that lot, and also I believe Last Frontier shares that lot, and so there's been that continual leasing. But that's one of the things to look at. Some of the things that'll come to this commission to look at is, should that be opened up to any business owner to use now versus it being reserved for 2 businesses?
I hate to compare apples and oranges, but it kind of reminds me of Palmer, where it's a shared experience when it comes to parking, right? So, and downtown Wasilla is not probably about, the layout's not the same, but you can park on the street, you can walk over to the brew house and watch the music, or you can come back and have lunch, or you can go shopping, and you really don't move, right? You're not going from business to business in your car. Where if we get to that point in Wasilla, you just park in one place, which that parking lot right, I think the one you're talking about is right across from the restaurant.
Grape Tap?
Great Tap, yeah. That's kind of a shared parking lot. Some of it's agreed to parking,
There's
right?
there's also another one that's on the corner.
Yeah, it's right on the
Across
corner
from
of Main and
it's
Main.
across from the old fire station.
It's where the old fire station was, actually.
With that, yeah, and because there's a little parking lot directly across from Crazy Moose Subs.
Yeah, that's the one
Yes.
that's set aside.
And that's those are the ones that are leased, correct? Because they have signage.
Yes.
And I
it is
read that,
leased.
I read that in the old code, that was one of the clauses, you had to
They
have
do,
signage.
But between the two lots, the grape tap and that one, if you kind of pay attention to down there, people park there and then they
Oh, yeah.
do what they do, right?
They don't enforce it.
No. And why would they, right? They're not gonna have a parking police sitting out there,
Well,
but
since the fire station parking lot went in, they don't enforce it, but the previous owner of Crazy Moose, when the fire station parking wasn't there, was very,
yes.
strict about that.
Probably,
Because they need
aren't
it.
until you have to be.
Because you can only put like 5, 6, 10 cars maybe in front of that gravel lot in front of the stairs. One thing I would be curious to see though is what it looks like with the couplet. And I know we've been talking about the couplet for, I don't know, since Burt Cottle was a teenager probably. But
12 years at least.
I'd like, eventually it'll go forward, right? So that's gonna make some significant changes downtown anyway.
Only on Main Street for parking. Is that what you're talking about for parking?
For parking, yeah, because the couplet itself is gonna make significant changes to parking in both directions, right?
Well,
Does that filter into any of the decision making?
well, it's something that the commission wants to take into consideration is how much will you receive of that project? How much will you lose of that project? How much needs to be offset because of the losses? I can get you the drawings.
It's been a while since I've seen them and I don't have a copy of them, but it seems to me you can add a lot of parking.
It's taken away quite a bit more than it's actually putting back. Unfortunately, because
Is it putting in curb and gutter in a lot of streets that didn't have it though?
It is, that's what I was thinking,
it's
on-street
only
parking.
Main Street that's getting on-street parking. Yenlo will not. It's too narrow. It's not as
wide enough.
wide. So it doesn't have any room for all of the infrastructure and on-street parking. Main Street will have, I would say, diagonal parking on the west side. So up against where the businesses are versus the post office side and the museum side. It will be on
So all
the west
those
side.
businesses are gonna lose their.
They will lose that front row, at least Valley Chiropractic will in that section, they will lose that row because most of that's in the right of way, and I think you can.
It's not their property.
Yeah, it's right of way.
I
It's not
understand it's
adjacent
not their
to them.
property.
But they're gonna have, it's gonna become parking spots. Right.
Part of it, but see, we have, the DOT is having to negotiate those driveways. So driveways, the city planning is trying to encourage people to give up the driveways on Main Street, use the side streets to come in, to go back and forth. Same with Richard Payne, but the property owners have their own future goals and their future plans, and this is a decision made between the property owner and DOT.
Yeah.
But anywhere these driveways come in, we lose the parking spaces, plus we have to have line of sight and other things, so it's taking away more than we anticipated when we first wrote the downtown overlay and got it going through. So unless we're able to convince those property owners to give up those driveways, we're not gonna get that much. In front of Richard's block, it would be 4 spaces for that entire block. If he keeps his driveway in the middle where he wants it. If he gives it up, we could get about 8 to 10. Yeah.
So a driveway takes off, it's 25 feet wide plus probably 10 feet, so 4 spots basically.
Yeah.
4 diagonal spots.
We just don't have a lot of room. What about that empty lot that the city purchased about a year and a half ago?
The one right across the street right here. Because of the standards and the width of the drive aisles, you might net, I don't know that we actually mapped this out, but I think we did some rough numbers. You might get 10 spaces. Because you're only gonna be able to do it on one side because it's so narrow.
Yeah.
You can't do a double tier. If there was some kind of collaboration, and that's some of the things I had on my list, it's Crystal's buzzword, but it's one I'm familiar with too. These public-private partnerships, these P3s. So one of the things you will see in your package are some proposed on-street parkings, and some options to, let's see, it's on page 35. If you look at that one, what it's showing you is what it could look like if the city could collaborate with Last Frontier, where he tore down those houses, and he just has that grassy lot next to his building. If we could work together and he would agree to do some kind of shared agreement, you could get, I lost the number off, but I think it was like 35 spaces, wasn't it, Tara? 30?
47. What's the number for the other one?
Oh, we did 27. So 27 spaces versus the, I don't know, maybe 12, 15 that are over there now. But it takes that combining of those two lots so that you can get the drive aisles and then the turnarounds for those. And there is an alley there, so that helps as far as connectivity and things like that. But unless there's some incentive the city can offer to him or agreement that we can negotiate. But that's one of the things that we wanted to bring forward, and that's included in some potentials.
Has anybody talked to him yet?
Not yet. That's why I said this is all new conversations. We just started it last summer talking to Archie and the mayor when it came up for that restaurant, the Meta and Rose Clock Tower.
So how come the, no, I won't be.
So it's 45 across from Crazy Moose. So it's 15 across and there's 3 rows.
Well, it says, oh, then we need to update our chart because it says 27.
Yeah, because you did, in your picture, you did 3 rows because you put a row across the lot line.
Yeah, right, and that's what we could do. So there's depending on how the commission goes forward, and some of this will have, all of its recommendations to the council, but, do they want to pursue these public-private partnerships, going in with owners? I don't know if he wants to sell it, because I think he's talked to me numerous times through the years about doing expansions or activating that space that he has in that wing that's sitting there empty of his building. So that building that you're seeing in that drawing on page 35, that section of the building doesn't have a use in it right now. He doesn't have the parking to put a use in that building, and I don't know that he has an interest either. We've worked with him over the years to find parking, but he hasn't come forward with a use in there. Still needs some parking. It's just whether or not he'd be willing to have it shared as public parking that's available to any. Then you also get into the issue of you have on-street parking, you have city parking. Do you want them to be pay parking? Do you want them to be free parking? There's pros and cons. There's cities that have found good and bad reasons, or good reasons for doing it, and then reasons not to do it. I think the worst offenders that are for on-street parking are the business owners themselves. They like to take that front row on-street parking and park their car there all day long and take up that space. So it's how do you train your business owners to not take up the public parking and see the value of being available for your customers?
Where's the business owner supposed to park?
In the back door. Because they usually arrive early and stay there all day. There's no
Diagonal parking spaces.
right. So if they're paid parking, sometimes you can discourage them from doing that. But then,
I don't think paid parking will go over very well.
No, I don't think so.
yeah. Well, the biggest thing for our city, and it's not a recommendation from staff yet. I think as we grow, as the couplet goes in, as we see infill, then there might be a different reason to do that. But you have to monitor it. It's like the parking lot across from Grape Tap. It was a paid parking lot, but most people never put the money in the box. I mean, I sat there different times. I parked there at lunch, or I'm checking email on the way home, or in the area. But I would sit and watch people that would just go there, and employees would park there and then just walk in. So there's other ways to do it.
People only pay where it's enforced.
Exactly, right.
If it's enforced and you get a ticket, then you pay the next time where you don't park there.
Now, I will tell you, although Mr. Payne is a proponent of no parking whatsoever, and he quotes Anchorage, without you having to read that entire document, Anchorage only has it in those few blocks downtown, And as we all know, when you go to Anchorage, what is it flush with in those core area? You know, between C and D and 4th and
Fifth and Sixth.
it's those parking garages that are managed and owned by the city who you have to pay to park in them. That's why they have no parking requirements. They don't have enough on-street parking to offer free there's no free parking. Everything's metered and it's paid, and the community gets it that way.
Well, I
So
don't
they're
know.
already doing a payment in lieu of for on-site parking.
Do we have that many visitors downtown where we got a bottleneck of parking? I mean, I've never been downtown where I've had an issue finding a place to park.
Well, you haven't yet.
You haven't been to Last Frontier for dinner.
I was gonna say, there are times
That's-
where there are.
Yeah,
The
there are
rate
times.
cap fills up at the lot across the
Then I
street.
park in Meadow and walk to Last Frontier.
And now you have competing businesses. Now, the
Oh,
Collect Tower now has a restaurant that is now a high.
Rate tap. It just seems to me more like a collaboration of businesses than it is
Well,
parking enforcement, you know?
yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot of ways to deal with it. And that's just, we're just touching the tip of the iceberg. So that's the kind of things to start thinking about, is how could you do that? How do you protect another business? I know what you'll see happen is GMO sits there with an empty parking lot. Now, that was their required parking, but I don't know that they want to give it up either. But as we grow and we develop more businesses, and restaurants are great for downtown, for bringing people down to once we get shops, then they'll shop, they'll eat, they'll do things. You've got the Valley Performing Arts. You've got things to do downtown. You have business owners that now get protective and they get nervous and they don't want people parking in their lot. Well, how do you stop them from overflowing over the weekend?
Well, that was I hesitate to compare Palmer and Wasilla just because. But that's kind of my comparison is I mean, even on the weekends, if you wanted to park at the Borough building, you know what I mean? Nobody's really gonna, you could park, on the weekends, you could park right here in this parking lot. Nobody's gonna say anything. I think if there's a more emphasis on you know, the shared areas with the different businesses, and we make that approach to the different businesses, maybe that's the answer. Because it works in Palmer. Again, you can park anywhere in Palmer, anybody else's business, wherever, and walk around town, and I've never had an issue in Palmer. You know, do people more possessive in Wasilla about their territory? You know, maybe.
We haven't had the demand. We really haven't, and you're absolutely right. There's plenty of parking right now everywhere, but we also have undeveloped land, and I truly believe that once that couplet comes through, you will see more interest in development or redevelopment or expansions of properties and things like that. And so we have a lot of underutilized properties, even the ones that are developed. I mean, Valley Chiropractic and that whole road all the way up to Nelson Bogard. They're all set way back. It's just happened organically over time, but the business owners who own these front lots have acquired the back lots. So they're in a sweet spot that you don't always find in a city. Sometimes it's someone owns the front and someone different owns the back, but they've managed to acquire these, or they own multiples. Valley Chiropractic owns multiples. Some of the other ones do. They own behind them. They could potentially build out their buildings to this new streetscape that's going to be in place as part of that couplet, expand that footprint, and now need additional parking. We want that retail space, we want that commercial space, we want that footprint, but then what does that do to your parking? And at some point, like I said, I think it's going to be a hybrid. I don't think it's going to be a no parking, but I think you can definitely go less, and there's a lot of shared opportunities, like it's education, getting business owners to recognize the benefit.
So question
That kind of thing.
for you, because right now it looks like we're at a balance of what is based on our code of required parking versus current parking if we have the overflow. And I'm just going through my head in different cities that I've lived in, and those cities are busy. Parking is, in every big city, parking is always an issue. It's something you deal with, like you have to deal with Anchorage too. It's not an easy thing. But it doesn't deter me from going. So, you know, having not having enough parking available spurs the conversation of public transit. Because You have to move people. That's how Denver conquered it. Denver brought in the light rail. And they put the light rail and took out a lot of their parking. They did that. But they're able to move people very quickly from outside into the core. So parking needs to have a public transportation conversation with it. When we're looking at this, we have to, if whatever we're going to make a recommendation towards, there's some things in here that talk about pickup points and stuff like that. If we're going to reduce, if we reduce it a lot, we need to pay special attention to that, so that as we restrict parking access in our city and the city gets busier, that the public transportation aspect of it can step in to smooth that, or pub providers, businesses can take advantage of it. Just, has anybody else thought on that?
I would like to see how much it costs the city of Anchorage for their public transportation and what they receive in revenue.
It's in their budget.
I'm sure the number is way more in the negative column than I can imagine.
I doubt that. That's, one of the things that people don't realize is one of the things that the airport did when they built the private partnership and stuff like that outside the airport, which the public loves. But the airport lost millions of dollars in revenue from those parking fees that people used to spend at the parking lot, long-term parking, things like that. Parking garages for the city and places like that, and it's money. It's a lot of money, but not a lot of overhead.
Well, does the city have any plan for any major parking garages in this downtown overlay?
There are any, I think if you took the entire block, you could maybe put a parking garage in, because to make them multi-story.
You need to go 3 or 4 stories.
You have to have the ramps and all of that, and they just they have a huge footprint. Anchorage city blocks are probably the equivalent of 4 of ours or something like that.
Well, my next question would be, does the city have any plan to try and help businesses that are not, like a lot of commercial area in this overlay, to help them move to a different location to allow a downtown to be built?
I'm not aware of anything.
Well, there's a lot of property here in this area that is industrial, or
There's no industrial in there.
the ones on Lucille okay, we wouldn't call them industrial, but the number of junk cars parked in that lot,
Okay, heavy commercial?
how many tourists are gonna walk through that area?
Well, I'm assuming you're talking about the self-storage, the mini warehouse.
Yeah, in the northwest corner of this overlay.
Yeah, and then you have 2 yes. So those uses are grandfathered in, so they wouldn't be allowed back in. I mean, so if they're ever sold and the next use is gonna have to comply. There's some grandfathering. If you sold transmission shop to someone who's gonna do a transmission shop, then the grandfathering sticks. But to do a transmission shop to now a paint and body shop, that's a change of use. That wouldn't be allowed. You'd have to comply.
Paint body shop's different than...
Yeah, it's a different, I mean, the goal is to have.
I asked that because I learned a very valuable lesson. Even though I sit up here, I didn't realize it. I was looking at a potential property, and we passed because of the landscaping costs that we were going to have to take on, because the owner wasn't going to pay for it. The tenant would have had to pay for all of it, and I knew that was going to be expensive. And then a new tenant went in the building, and they didn't have to do anything. And I was like, what the heck? And it was because it went from being a motorsports to an auto dealership, which is the Payless auto place there. They didn't have to do any landscaping because it wasn't landscaped before, so they just continued on their merry way.
No, they have some landscaping they had to do.
They didn't have to bring it up to new stuff. They were able to avoid a lot because it was the same use. They didn't have to redo it.
Right. Yeah, so there are some protections that way.
That's, yeah. All right, so what portion should we start with? What are you bringing to us first? Is this just the intro?
Yeah, this was more the intro.
Okay.
I mean, it's, like I said, I wanted to bring it in, let you know the history on it, let you know what the goal is, give you the information. Like I said, let you see his email, what he's proposing, let you see what Palmer and Anchorage actually do. Palmer, surprisingly, I could not find, I'll have to do some phone calls because I couldn't find it online. Palmer has a payment in lieu of on-site parking. I couldn't find a price for it. And I'm not sure that they're actively using that, because like you said, there's a lot of on-street parking in Palmer. That's something that I have, like I said, we just started with this. If you look at that, the other side of that long sheet, you can see where there's areas that we could pull in some on-street parking, but not a lot. I mean, it just has to do with site distances and for turning radius, and with us having such small blocks and there's driveways for businesses. But wherever there is, and again, we only looked at this area, we're gonna take it to the other side of Main Street and look at that area too. I mean, some of this will have to be, Commissioner Bushnell, you mentioned about if there's no parking. See, I don't think that's the problem when you go to Anchorage, that there's no parking, is there's no parking within your willingness to walk.
Where you want to park,
Right. So some of that'll have to be educational, and that is a decision. I mean, personally, I remember in downtown Sarasota, there was, that's typical downtown and it was single story. It was the old 60, 70 development that you see in California and other places, those old towns. And there's diagonal parking. And there's a smoothie shop and there's all these restaurants and tons, but there's not near enough on-street parking and there's no parking garage. So you basically cruise the boulevard to see if there's an open space, and you might do the block 2 or 3 times in a 2 or 3 block radius. And eventually you're like, okay, I don't have enough time now. I got to go on. I'll hit McDonald's or something because I can't find a parking space. And the business owners who move in accept that as there's a risk that, there may or may not be parking spaces. So I would anticipate after we have a couple conversations here at the commission that we need to schedule a workshop charrette with the downtown business owners and the property owners to get their input and to see what their tolerance is for having my parking, sharing my parking, not having a parking requirement and taking that risk. I mean, and some of it, they can make their own decisions when you develop a vacant lot or you buy one. Does it have any on or not? That's a risk they knowingly assume. But if we're looking to,
Knowingly?
well, it should be knowingly. They should be on notice. There's only 10 spots and I have a 30-seat restaurant. It's not likely they're all going to fit in those 10 spaces.
Let's have that meeting at a business on Main Street and everybody show up and see how the parking goes.
Yeah.
We'll have food trucks in the city lots. So
So would that be the next step then, is try to come up with a working group and notify local businesses to see if they want to participate and do it face-to-face, or see if they want to do input in writing? Or?
When we had the best, most impactful committee of the wholes, was when we opened it up when we were doing the architects, and that's why we finally went in the direction we did, going back to the city council and said, please point somebody on this, because us up here talking about it, we're not the experts on it. We have anecdotal information, and some of us background might have a little bit more of specific areas, but when it comes right down to it, we don't have that true what if we make this change, what's the unintended consequences of it down the road? We can get them here and we can open up the committee whole. We opened it up with the architects because there wasn't very many people, and they became part of the discussion. And then we can find out, okay, I'm thinking this idea, is this a crazy idea? And then they can sit there and go, well, here's some give and take to that idea. Same as a work session without changing our meeting venues, if they can come in.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to go in complete left field, but if I was to say the biggest bone of contention I hear out there has nothing to do with parking, has everything to do with cost of landscaping.
Oh, yeah, we're past that.
No, I know. I'm just saying, as high on the priority list for the community, you know, but if we're planning ahead, I agree, this is a good.
You know, it's funny about landscaping because everybody complains about it, but go down to one of those greenhouses and see how many people are in there spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on a good weekend before in the summer, and nobody has problem spending money on beautifications. It's just that.
That's a personal
It's just
choice on a personal property, so,
We should have taught Ken's into coming into the city.
I have a question. Does the city have, or do they have or use a regular traffic engineer?
They do not have one on contract. I know that right now, we have engineers, the director and the deputy director are engineers, but they're not transportation engineers.
We might want to see if we could find a transportation engineer to possibly get in on this discussion.
one that we can invite to one of our meetings
Yeah.
just for the committee of the whole.
I think that would be a
Invite some
valuable
experts to
thing
talk to
because
us.
that's their field of expertise. And I think it would be valuable for us all to hear, at least from somebody that has expertise in the field.
So you may not be, you mentioned a transportation engineer. I think you're looking for they design,
know
they
there's-
design roadways.
I
Well, it'd be
know,
both. It would be we could use a transportation engineer because what we're talking about also is the
Well,
streets.
yeah, and we're
the
talking
parking.
about this couplet that's gonna come through, that's gonna alter a lot of things. And so that, I know DOT has had traffic engineers and transportation engineers look at all that stuff on that project. And I just don't wanna have unintended consequences for what we decide to do.
But what you're doing is land use planning. You're not doing the design of a roadway.
Well, we're
Roads,
talking about
we have
parking
one.
in the downtown area, so.
Right, so I think you're thinking more of it would be closer to a transportation planner than an engineer. Because
Okay,
again, you're talking about land use and the way that businesses in,
Well,
it's
I
the
may not-
parking that's required. So I just want to make sure what you're looking for, and I want to get you the right
Who
person.
designs it? Who designs a parking lot?
Anyone can design, an architect can design a parking lot, and most of the time it is your architects that are doing it.
So they're the,
It's
so
not
they're the
an
ones
engineer that does it, it's an architect,
architects doing. Okay.
or, so.
Civil engineer, it's usually on your civil
Some of
drawings.
them do, the smaller projects, the bigger projects, it's usually it's often thrown to an architect too. It could be either one, I see them come both ways.
well, we're talking about a fairly substantial project, which is this downtown overlay. So there, besides the architects that are designing the parking spaces for these vacant lots that may be filled in the future or redesign of use of the lots, I would just like to have somebody in the expertise field give us some comment if we can find somebody.
And I'm not trying to be argumentative or resistant, I'm just trying,
I'm not sure the correct term, whether
Right,
it's
and that's-
engineer or what their title is, but
the design is the easy part, that's not an issue. We don't have any problem with the dimensions and the drive aisle widths and all of that. That works. What the question of the day is, should a business owner have to provide on-site parking to meet their demands for their business? Or should there be some other options available on the table to provide appropriate parking without encroaching onto other business owners who choose to have their on-site parking, and to make sure that we don't create economic issues. This is a land use economic-
I think I understand exactly what you're saying, and I understand what you're saying. You don't want to go back and redo all of our interior parking lot stuff, but we need to understand how that plays. I mean, somebody talked to us and we talk about both. That's why he's asking for somebody on that expert side is yeah, we have I'll give an example, and correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm overstating this. You gave us these drawings here on page 34 and 35
yes.
for hypothetical parking spots. This was the frontier across the grass lot and the gravel lot. So here's a potential of a bunch of parking spots. Okay. So that's an idea, but this doesn't even meet our code because it's 14, because you can't go more than 12, right?
No, downtown doesn't have the same,
Now-
down has different than the rest of the city.
So what we need to be able to understand, if we're going to make a change on the street, how would that, if we say, okay, you don't have to do these parking lots, how does that affect it? If we change how we do those parking lots, how does that affect it? That's why I think you're asking for that type of expert.
And traffic in and out of those parking lots.
Correct. It's all of it.
All the traffic in this area in the next 3 years is gonna change. Everything's gonna change. You're gonna find people that
Change.
think it's really stupid. Well, it's gonna change
It'll take
flow
time,
on
yeah.
Yenlo, it's gonna change flow on Main Street.
And we're going to get a parking lot. Y marks the spot.
Page is that?
The big one, the fold-out. The gas station on the corner of Main Street. They're not going to be able to fill their tanks.
Oh, it's not, it won't be a parking lot. It's not a good location for a parking lot.
But I mean, the way that road's going to flow, that business has got an issue.
Yeah, it does.
It has a huge issue, so that would be a really good spot for a downtown parking lot to feed all those businesses.
But actually, they don't have as big an issue as you think they do. The other side has the worst issue because there was plans to put a gas station on
Or
that.
do they want to put one over
But
there?
this one, they have an alley behind them. And they can go up, they just have a longer route now. They can come up Cruzy from the parks, come across any of these, Herning, Swanson, or Bogard, come down Main Street, come in.
They can get in.
They can come in,
Get in.
and then they can go back up the alley.
They can make it up the alley?
I mean, they would have to redesign and how they do it.
Have you ever
We had a
seen that
conversation
alley?
here one night, and it was a question whether or not actually I had the conversation with the building owner across the street, who was trying to get them to move the gas station across the street to his property, because he thought it would be better.
And then I made the mistake of going all the way up that alley and then the other alley and didn't realize till I got to the end of that alley that was a one-way alley.
The opposite way.
So it will take some coordination and some planning, and I'm not sure
Trying to
they're
get through
looking,
that alley is tricky.
Yeah.
I'm not sure they're planning ahead, but I mean, they have some options. I mean, they could coordinate with Last Frontier, or something, maybe, I don't know. I think, and they tend to come in this outer part of the corner, I think is where their tanks are.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure they can make that turn. I know the double one probably can't, but a single one, maybe, I don't know. Out of all the people that I've heard from in the planning office about concerns with the couplet, I've not heard from the gas station, which I find interesting, because I've noticed the same thing. I'm like, how are you gonna make that work?
It's come up in a couple conversations I've had with different business owners.
Right, but not that business owner.
That business owner.
Which is, so I don't know, are they smart and they have a plan, or they just aren't thinking? I hope that they have a plan.
And they're in transition too, because they've been bought corporately by other corporations. And I think Circle K, which is part of 7-Eleven, took them
Oh, is
over.
it Circle K?
It's Circle K now.
Speedway.
Speedway.
Well,
Speedway.
yeah. That's,
Are they Circle K also?
Yeah.
Oh, they're
they
one and the
are.
same. Okay. They used to be separate, but I guess they.
and I think it's all owned by 7-Eleven.
So is that the next step then, is to put a notification out to business owners to,
Well, yeah, we just need to,
Feedback.
definitely need to get them to come talk to us.
Yeah, we'll send a flyer out. We've got email addresses for the actual occupants of the building. They're not necessarily the owner of the property, but so we can email to the business owners. We can mail a flyer to the physical property owners. Some of them are the same, some of them are not. And we'll do like we did with the downtown overlay. What we did is we indicated all the upcoming meetings where they could come and participate, how they could find the materials online to see, sign up for notifications for the packet, all of that kind of stuff, and invite them. We can certainly do that. At some point, like I said, it may behoove us to do a charrette-type workshop where they actually sit at tables and they actually try and draw up scenarios and look at this kind of stuff. We may or may not need that. I'm just putting it out there as that's a possible option. And then I will give it some thought as to, so these drawings, just so you know, these were done by Tahara using AutoCAD. You don't need an expert to know how to design a parking lot. You just have to know what the standard is. You go in AutoCAD and draw it. The standards are standards. They're national standards for typicals, for parking lots, for drive aisle widths to allow sufficient turnaround. That's not the scary or the hard part about this conversation. The hard part is that balance of business owner expectations, providing enough for, making sure there's enough for customers so that you can allow economic development, future growth. I mean, if you're a business owner looking to come into downtown and you drive around and you see all the lots are full and all the spots are too small for you to put your building on, you're not coming down. I mean, if there's a parking garage and there's this flow of in and out traffic and there's that transient component to parking, then that's not as scary to a business owner. But if everybody's locked in and owns their own and, you know, it's all private, I mean, this is an economic development and a land use conversation. This really isn't a technical conversation. We can get you, I mean, trips depend on the use. We don't know what the use is going to be in the building. It could be retail, it could be restaurant, it could be whatever. So that's going to be what generates your traffic on the roads. But the right-of-ways are fixed. We already have our curbs in place. A lot of these are out of our control. What we can control is how do we help new businesses come to the city and relieve them of some of these onerous parking requirements that take up a large portion of a small lot or make it infeasible to do, and give them alternative ways to provide parking. That's what the goal is.
Correct.
To encourage that economic development and what kind of ways to do it. So I'm happy to bring an expert, and that's why I'm saying I'm trying to make sure that I get you who you need, but the technical isn't the part, it's the socioeconomic part.
The technical will help. I think it will help us.
Yeah, and I'm looking at,
In addition, because what you're going to get is you're going to get the homeowners or the business owners, and they're all going to have an opinion on how everything should be. That doesn't necessarily cover the whatever route we're going. There might be some things there that some potholes in the plan, and that's where an expert can help and say, that's a great idea, but consider this when you do that. There's this consequence, and that's where that expert, another voice along with yours, can help us just give multiple visions of, okay, well, if you get rid of 30, if we developed out these lots and it gave us X, we said, okay, we're going to put something in play that we know that it'll be X minus 20%. And we know we're going to be under on parking because we're going to go these other routes. But you're going to have to wait for those developments to do it. That's why I'm asking. I think that's why you're asking that question.
yeah, and I know we have codes and all this stuff for parking lots, but with the new traffic pattern coming in and all this, and we're deciding where to put on-street parking and not where to put on-street parking. A traffic flow engineer, I don't know, I'm not sure the technical term, but somebody that,
Parking lot, please.
That's what I think that's what I'm.
we have code
We have
enforcement.
that in-house. We already have engineers in-house that know
Okay.
enough about what these radiuses are around from intersections where you can and can't put parking. We have that. I don't think that's what we need from this commission, though. Again, we can get you those numbers of how much on-street parking we can fit. That's part of what I anticipate providing to the commission.
You're asking for a warm and fuzzy response from a bunch of commissioners that are technical people. and that you don't do warm and fuzzy. We do fact, find, and delineate. So that's I think that's where he's kind of coming from. And I look at it as I love to listen to the business owners, and I love the public opinion, but that's not, if the public opinion had its way, there wouldn't be a flower in this city. Okay, there would be no landscaping because they want us all to throw it out because
That's not true.
a lot of them want us to throw it out. But it's a very narrow, everybody's got their own lane. And what we're dealing with here is going to affect a lot of lanes. It affects different businesses different ways.
A lot of
It
them.
affects a restaurant completely different. I mean, I've been handcuffed at Seward Meridian Plaza with the building over there with my parking, and I've got a lot of parking. But I also know that I'm right at the edge of all these numbers because I've calculated them out. And if I change a business use or I change this, I have other people that want to do restaurants. If I add a second restaurant or something like that, it's going to change my calculations. Because when they originally set it up, it was one whole building was supposed to be a warehouse, and it's not. So it changed the calcs for the whole project. So that's when a business owner changes their use, they may or may not know that they've even done something bad. I get people all the time, they're like, how come I got to do this? The last building owner didn't make me do it. So there's a lot of people that are flying life out there that don't even know there's rules. So getting a bunch of I'd love to have the public talking, yes, but sometimes those opinions aren't always based in fact of what we need to accomplish, but they're very passionate.
I think what the business
They're very
owners-
believable.
Yeah, I think what the business owners, the most valuable thing you're going to get from them is what are their fears and how can they be relieved? And, there's risk to them. I mean, I, as a planner, shared parking makes total sense. As a landowner, it's frightening because if someone trips and falls in your parking lot, you're liable. So the minute I say my parking lot can now be used by anyone other than my customers, I'm assuming the risk from your drunk customers coming out of your restaurant that are tripping and falling in my parking lot. They're not going to sue you, they're going to sue me.
Those aren't the ones that sue you, it's the
But it can be any of them. It
person
can,
that just had double arm surgery wearing flip-flops in the middle of winter that tripped.
it can be that. It can be anything. But I'm just saying is,
Yeah, I got one of those.
What are the expectation of our business owners in the city? And you need to know what those are, whether you write your code to reflect that or not. You need to understand what their concerns are and what their goals are. Again, you've got other business owners who would love to have, and the city would love to have a 50-seat or 100-seat restaurant. But if there's not parking within a quarter-mile radius that complies with even a reasonable parking standard code, what other tools do we have in our toolbox that we can put out there to still bring that restaurant downtown? And again, you'll have to patrol the streets looking for parking. But what are their requirements? How can you bring them down without them crashing the system, but yet, what's a reasonable standard? So, I would say if you guys would look at our code right now, the downtown's not going to help you so much. That's just the design. But I wanted you to have that. You can look at Anchorage. It's a lot of detail, and it really doesn't compare to ours. Palmer would probably be just a good one because you're familiar with it. It's small enough. You can get a feel for how that code actually maybe looks. I can do some more analysis to see if even Palmer's rules reflect what's on the ground, because that's what we find is it doesn't really reflect what's happening.
That's what I was going to ask the next question. I didn't have a chance. I didn't get a good feel of the Palmer code. I know the Anchorage code fairly well because I used to work there. But the Palmer code, I was going to say, your experience of going over there, is it what you see in the code is what you see on the street?
No.
So,
I'd be lying if I said yes.
Yeah.
so one of the things that the landscape, we ran into it with the commission in 2017 when we redid the landscaping code, and then the group that's working that met last night, the best thing that I heard them say was, You need to find what you like and then find a way to write a code to require that. Stop trying to read this code and steal this section from this code and this section from that code, because it's hard to visualize what it actually looks like on the ground without paying an architect
You
to
got
go do renderings for you to show you what it's going to look like. Go find something that's interesting. So what we had last time was, we had a PowerPoint, and I gave it to that group too, and we're going to update it and give them current things to look at. But we had the actual site plan that was approved and the landscape plan that was approved for businesses. And then we had photos that showed what that landscaping actually looked like on the ground. Now, what was hard is Target, for example, well exceeded the requirements of the day. They don't comply with today's code, but they still well exceed a lot of the components of our code. So that was one that was brought up at the time that was considered attractive. It was visually interesting. It had varieties of trees. It wasn't, it doesn't have the perennial flowers, but they have some flowering shrubs. But how do you codify that so that that's the kind of end result and still have some flexibility in there? So,
Are we gonna also,
I can look at these codes and try and see if Palmer may be the same way. Just because they say you don't have to have parking, do the businesses actually have parking anyway? So you can't just say, well, Palmer doesn't require any parking and it works great. I know that there are businesses that some are set at the street and only have on-street parking. Some are set back and have 2 rows of parking plus on-street parking on both sides, plus behind them. So, I mean, there's a variety even in Palmer. So we can try and get you some more information on, does their code actually reflect what you're seeing? And maybe you don't want their code. Maybe you want to look at what they have and write a code to allow that kind of a scenario or pieces of that.
so one more question for you, just for looking for interacting pieces of this for the rest of the city code and stuff like that, is, has the city been looking to the future in any way, new or electrical vehicles and things like that? Because one thing that's not, I haven't seen any development yet around here is towards electrical vehicles, electrical charging stations, public charging stations. Has the city been talking in the future? Yeah, I'm looking at Crystal.
Yeah, so I just was in Vegas at the International Shopping Center Convention. There was 44,000 people there and about 10,000 vendors, and parking was a 3-hour conversation. What was really fascinating is Chick-fil-A talked to us about their original parking plan when they set up a restaurant. And during COVID, they doubled their revenue with the first line of parking because they had to do something. So the inside obviously was closed, and so they took each of those parking lots and they monetized how they could double their revenue, because it went from a conversation of real estate cost to real estate monetization. So they went from 4 million to 8 million, like that. You can go up to Lowe's right now and they'll tell you that those parking spots that used to be just additional parking, those are now shop online and come pick your order up. So I think what I'm hearing here is that business will move in a way that expands their possibilities and their opportunities. And they don't always have a plan. So the plan component is not their first thought. It's like, how can I monetize that rent I'm paying for? So Chick-fil-A gave a good presentation. Lowe's and Home Depot also said their business were skyrocketing, and so they just took their parking lot and turned it into a wave of commerce, which was great. And then the electric charging stations, some of the cities said, we found a spot that wasn't ideal parking, a little smaller than normal, but we had the cities engage with either allowing a electric vehicle design company to come in and set the infrastructure up, and then they charge the city so much per month. The overall conversation was, it's not a matter if you like electric or not, it's coming, and how are you going to adopt to it, and how are you going to monetize it? So that's really, I think, my takeaway from the shopping centers is that people have a Prius, they want to go find it charging, and while it's charging, they'll go into these shopping centers and do their shopping for the half hour it takes or hour it takes. So parking has become, instead of a static cost, it's become an opportunity of how to monetize and get additional revenue. And so we're seeing it here in the city too. And I think it's our responsibility to go out and bring those ideas and that new information and see how they respond and get a temperature from them. Because some of the smaller businesses did very well during COVID because they just said, you don't have to come in our store, we'll just bring it out to you. And now their rent is being paid for online. So it was really, I thought it was really encouraging, because sometimes disruption causes us to kind of shift a little bit. And we could be one of the first cities in this area that tries something new. And these electric charging companies said, there's no reason for cities to go and incur all the debt. Let us just come and show you how we can you connect us to the market, and it'll be a small fee for us to rent that piece of property. And I know that the mayor's vision is to offer the infrastructure in innovative ways. So, yeah, kind of a good thing.
As long as she's not competing with the commercial industry.
Bingo. Yeah.
Which right now, there's not really a commercial industry.
Not yet.
So it would be a different conversation, but it'd be good for the city to develop and then sell. Create a,
So do they charge for this, or are they free to use?
They charge.
Oh, they were,
Yeah.
that you had
Yeah.
to credit card slot,
Yeah.
like a park, oh?
yeah,
Yeah, you're,
just like filling up your car.
Yeah.
not much is for free in this world.
Even the internet's not free
A friend of
anymore.
mine bought the Jack River Inn up in Cantwell, and he just put one in. Had his first customer last week, actually. And I want to say that the company, and I can get more details on it, but the company that he bought the machine from flew up and helped them with the installation. The power grid, already at the end, they just had to do an electrical contractor had to come in and do the tie-in.
Okay.
And I got to find out the details on what the whole agreement was. But it's not. He wouldn't have done it if he wasn't going to make $1.
That's one thing that people have to definitely be watchful of. That's from the real estate side of it, real estate world side of it, like all the solar arrays that are all over a lot of these communities. Many of them are leased, and they actually have agreements in place that prohibit the next borrower from purchasing the house if they're not credit worthy. So if their credit isn't good enough, even though they want to buy that house, that owner can't sell to them because they don't qualify, not just through the lender, but through the solar company.
And the way that
It's just-
the vendor presented it was, if you've got, a row of 10 electric charging car stations, so they outfront the capital, they say, okay, for 50 years, or whatever, 30, 40 years, whatever, we're gonna install it, we're gonna maintain it, we're gonna give you $1.50 every car that comes in here a day. Doesn't seem like a lot, so you got a long rate of return, 40 years or something, but it's still passive income.
It's
It's not
passive.
like you're taking, city employees over there to maintain
It's
stuff.
passive income.
But to your point, if you have a business that goes along with that charging station, they're going to come in and if they weren't going to stop there before, they're going to come into your store now, right?
Right. Because frankly, when I went down, I thought shopping centers are a thing of the past. Who's going to go to a shopping center? Well, this is a transformation of. They said that the average family spent for every $100 spent at the grocery store, 120 was spent eating out. After COVID, it's 150. So people kind of adopted the habit of going out, parking, having their food brought out, and go home. And now that everything is open again, these shopping centers are getting really innovative on how they're luring people in and keeping them. Yeah. Good stuff.
So this can be a very, very detailed conversation. I think there's a lot of moving parts pieces that can affect the decisions that are made moving forward. If we explore and feel comfortable with them, then I think feel much better about a product pushed up the ladder. Anything else?
So the one thing that I'm going to, based on the feedback and the questions that came up tonight, it's making me think about it in a different way, which is good. But I'm not gonna put it on next month's agenda because I wanna do a lot of research, get some information, try and find the people you're looking for to come in and talk about what you're talking about. I mean, I can put it on there, but there won't be new information necessarily from staff, which typically, to be honest,
We can do 15 minutes and see if we have anybody that will come to the meeting as far as public testimony, et cetera.
you can, yeah, if you're comfortable with just having it as a work session without a lot of new information from staff, that's fine.
Yeah, if we
But
spend,
it's a lot of moving parts and a lot of direction, and I wanna try and get you a bare bones, at least some outlines, break some of this out. Again, it's land use related, and I've been running in a lot of different directions, dealing with other things, projects, so I have to now shift my focus to parking. So this is the next priority project that's coming forward. So I want to get you a better outline of the things you need to talk about, the talking points. Hopefully it'll answer some of your questions and it'll give you some more assurances. There are tons of studies, tons of articles, tons of real life scenarios, similar sized towns, all of that information that I can get to you. I can summarize it and get to you. Typically that's what I do is I start with at least a draft and start having some conversation, have some scenarios at least to show you what we're talking about, the pros and cons, that kind of stuff. But that takes a lot of legwork between dealing with all the permits and the questions that come in every day. So it's a labor intensive thing. I may actually look to, I don't know, there's possibilities we can bring in consultant. We have consultant money. I don't really think it needs that level, but if the commission wants to take it down that path, that's an option too. Again, I'm still seeing it as it is an economic and a land use conversation versus an engineering conversation, but I don't want to discount that piece of it either. So I'm going to wrap my head around that and try and find the right source to get you the information that you need. And then we haven't done our analysis of the rest of the downtown. So that's boots on the ground, us going out, measuring roads, measuring actual widths. The city doesn't have any of this stuff. None of this data is available. So we're creating the wheel, basically, at this point in time. So to my knowledge, Public Works doesn't have these measured widths. They think they know, or Archie probably had it all in his head, but we have to physically go out. We need to look at what the quality of the infrastructure is. You know, are the roads even able to support? Is it going to be, where are the manholes? Where are the storm drains? You know, all of this kind of stuff that factors into, can you put a parking spot? Where are these driveways? What is that actual distance? The borough's maps are great to a certain level, but then after that you start losing accuracy. So before we can, you know, these are rough approximations and super enthusiastic and hopeful predictions, but whether they actually come to fruition or not, and whether there's the money to go in, because you have to build bulb outs on these corners if you're going to do parallel parking, so that when a car is turning the corner, they don't rear end the car that's parked there. So that's capital costs, you know, that have to be factored in too. So some of it may be cost prohibitive, some of it may have to be like a phase 2 type of approach, or you know what I mean, it may not be able to factor in. So I'll get a lot of that. We'll go ahead and then just put it on there for conversation, but know that the meeting after next, I'll have you a lot more information.
Okay.
And if, you know, your city engineers that are familiar with this couplet interchange coming through, I would be happy to have them show up too. Because I may end up having questions for your city engineers. Rather than try and bring in some expert, they may be able to solve the questions. Some of them anyway. And one thing we have to factor in everything here in Wasilla is winter. Because those bump outs on the corners, that's going to be a grader operator's friend.
It definitely has maintenance issues, but that's downtown, the couplet's gonna have that anyway on at least the Main Street segment. Because there's, now you have an 8-foot sidewalk, a 4-foot bike lane, or not a bike lane, it's an elevated bike path that's at the same height as the sidewalk on one side of the street. That's a maintenance issue, but that's part of doing downtown. Inlow will be more typical. But that's it, yeah. So, and we need to look at, like Commissioner Bushnell mentioned, even though we won't be positioned for a rail transit system for many, many years because we don't have the ridership, if you're doing infrastructure improvements, you need to factor those in. Because at the time when you need them, you're not gonna be able to afford them. The land will be used up or developed up or something like that, so you need to take that into consideration too.
Kind of like having a bypass.
So this will give us a chance, everybody can go back through this material a little bit more closer, look at it. And now that we kind of know the direction that we're moving towards, because I was going through it and then there was a whole section that was highlighted and I was like, oh, was that the part that I was supposed to be focused on?
That's the applicable part.
So I focused in on that and then, that now that we've been through this discussion, when we go to the next meeting, we can have a quick, more detailed conversation. And maybe some people will come and testify, which would then give us something else.
And we'll send those invites out in the next week or so that the business owners know and start getting more information on the webpage. Crystal may be able to
When
put
is-
this out with Facebook.
That meeting is July 12th.
Second Tuesday. Let's see. I don't have a calendar.
Yeah, I got one in front of me. It's the 12th.
So that's what it is. Okay.
All right, so I guess I'll go to Lake Clark on the next week. That's right. Sell land.
So I don't think we actually have anything.
Across the water.
We don't have anything else on the agenda, do we? Today? No one submitted. So this will be the discussion. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's a different discussion then. Do we want to have if there's nothing on the agenda, do we just want to have the meeting for the committee of the whole, or do we want to just move on?
We're at a committee as a whole, and
I mean, that would be the only thing on the agenda. If there's no,
The deadline's passed.
do I just want to have a meeting for this?
Well, that's just 30 days from now. Tina was talking, she had a lot of stuff to put together.
She wasn't going to have it for that meeting. We were just going to have a brief little 15-minute discussion on, I meant on top of whatever business else we would have for that meeting. But if there's no other business, it was just a little filler in case we had a couple people come and talk. If there's not going to be a big conversation, I'd rather go to Lake Clark. Your guys' thoughts?
I think we don't have anything to discuss, other than this, and if it's not gonna take up more than 15 minutes, probably not good use of time.
We could push it to an hour and a half easily. We just did. But
so you want to adjourn in committee as a whole?
we're going to adjourn from committee of the whole. Actually, yeah, if I could have a motion to adjourn from committee of the whole.
I make a motion to come out of committee as a whole.
Commissioner Sales seconds.
All right, no objections. We're out of committee of the whole at 7:24. So, that being said, the next meeting, we have nothing on the agenda except for the committee of the whole. Should we have that meeting?
My personal opinion is we should wait for the July meeting.
I'm talking about the July.
Committee of the whole.
That's the only thing that would be,
Enough time?
no, she said.
No. So,
So there's no point.
no.
That's why I'm asking. I just realized that. It's like, okay,
Yeah, I just figured out it was.
I guess I would ask,
Okay, now.
how much the planning office, how much time do they need?
Well, I will have it for you for the August 9th meeting, the next regularly scheduled meeting is my
And
plan.
let's go
And
for it.
that's what I was saying, let's
Yeah.
put,
And what we can do is we can do the flyers and the input and the news stories to let the businesses know you're starting this conversation, be ramped up, come ready in August. Give us written comments ahead of time, try and get the word out there so that they are aware that it's actively going on. And then we'll see if we can get, maybe Bob Wallace, the Public Works Director, to answer any kind of the technical questions you have from an engineering standpoint, from that in-house. And then if you need somebody after that, you'll have more concrete questions, and then we can go find someone, whether they can attend or not, maybe Zoom them in if they can't attend in person, this option, that kind of stuff.
And Bob's been working on the couplet, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, I'm involved with it from the, looking at it from the planning standpoint, and Bill's been involved with the art was, yeah. So there's several players that have worked with that. And if you come to the business owners meeting next Friday, 24th.
okay.
So I can email you guys the flyer. So there will be a brief overview, so if you wanted to at least see, get that kind of a quick snippet,
Okay.
that'll be going on.
That'd be very handy.
All right, so I will move on for unfinished, there's no unfinished business, so we'll move on to communications. Following items were under communications in the packet. Are there any comments on the permit information for the Mat-Su Borough Planning Commission agenda?
Just one quick, Commissioner Bernie here. I was just wondering if you can wrap text on your Excel spreadsheet. I'm not asking to add more work for the planning's office, but we get a little bit more information on what the permit is specifically. In other words, is it a garage? Is it a tenant fit up for a restaurant?
So you want that description, a little bit of a brief
Is that
description?
okay? Is that,
No, we can get
It's
that,
nice,
we
okay.
can get that. There is a field, just so you know, so you won't get staff doing it. That field is populated by the applicant. So if it looks a little weird or
Okay.
something, and we can try and clean some of it up, but, yeah, there's definitely a report that we can get.
and it's just kind of, I wouldn't call it being nosy, just when people are asking, it's kind of nice to know what permits are out there, what construction's going on around town.
Yep. Do you want to know like a business name too?
Don't need that. Just is it, well, I mean, if you can throw that in there,
Yeah,
that'd
it's
be
a
great.
field, I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of times, so.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the one great thing about citizen service. There's a lot of reporting that we can do that we don't have to manually do anymore. So we haven't
Yeah.
explored the full, aspect of what it can do. But yeah, we'll definitely get with them to do that for you.
Is enforcement picking up signs again?
It's not
Streets?
like a directive.
They used to, they were really bad for, and I say bad because
No, they were really good.
they're really good from the city side, really bad from the real estate side. Of catching open house signs and things like that were left out more than the day.
I think you're having the luxury of these are the land use things that the code compliance officer's doing. There's probably another page or two of animal control that's taking up the time.
Gotcha.
So that's why you may see some
Those
things that are
chickens,
not
those
being
chicken
resolved.
bunnies
The
and
dogs,
bees.
dogs,
Oh,
cats,
Four-letter word.
a turkey.
Yeah.
There was a turkey in the Alaska Club parking lot that someone called about. So it's
They
like,
just shoot it.
Hopefully it
that's
was.
why I said throw it in the back of your vehicle
We'll
and
take her home.
break its neck and eat it for dinner or something. I don't know. But I'm like, how do you find the owner of a turkey? So yeah, animal control is taking up a lot of time. I know there's been conversations about how to balance that demand and other options, but so yeah, we're trying to, and business licensing too. So a lot of business licenses. So it's just one of the officers, so enjoy it while you have it.
All right. Yeah. Try to stay away from them open houses. Oof. All right. I'm going to skip audience comments for tonight. Since there's no one in attendance for the record. Staff comments?
I do have a comment. So last month I told you that the economic development region out of Seattle awarded us $70,000 for an economic development planning tool, and the council matched that, so we have $140,000. And it's called a SEDS, a Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. It's something that the Kenai Borough started about 10 years ago. They've been very successful at diversifying and kind of forth-thinking on what their economy is going to do. The same with the North Star Borough, Fairbanks North Star Borough. So we've been in conversation with them about the process. So the first step was to write an RFP for a company that does economic analysis, so we can just have a baseline. And so I just wanted to publicly thank planning for really reaching out and saying, look, we have all these plans, a downtown plan and a comp plan, but how do you monetize those plans? How do you economically put some kind of resource together that shows comprehensively where we're going in the next 10 years? Most of the time, these planning tools are for boroughs, but the Matsu Borough doesn't have an appetite for it, so we took it on as a city. And we just completed, with the help of, Tina put many hours in it to really say, look, we don't need another study, we need an actionable plan. And it's really co-authored by the private sector. Like, what does the private sector need and how are we gonna be partners? So you'll be seeing that coming forward. That's gonna hit the streets here in the next 2 weeks, and it's a $120,000 RFP for services. And so once we get that will set the kind of the framework of how this is gonna roll for the next year. And the goal is to have a comprehensive blueprint in the next 5-10 years, that if you're going to Chicago and you want to tell people what your city's doing, it at least gives them a little bit of a story of where we were and where we're going. So wanted to thank you guys too for your support and helping us get this. Like I said, we're the only city in this. Well, Anchorage has a little bit different model, and the state just updated their sets, but we're actually in the conversation now of all the cities. So anyway.
Does, question on that, Crystal, is a local company that's doing it, or is it somebody from outside?
So we haven't made any awards. The RFP is going out.
Okay, gotcha.
So what Fairbanks saw is there was 37 different companies that bid from all across the nation. So we'll have to see what kind of response we get.
I asked that question because I got the opportunity to sit on a citizen advisory board panel for MEA for their overhead lines that they're taking up the north side of the borough, and they learned their lesson. They learned a lesson from when they put the overhead power lines through Wasilla, that they didn't open it up to public comment soon enough. It was very heated when they did. So they opened it up really early this time, too early. And I was sitting on the appeal, and there were several appeals to the process, but all the appeals are based on the next phase of what they would do. And they hired an outside consultant to do this, and they did everything online because they were doing it from 30,000 feet, looking at everything. Because the next step would be your phase 2s, it'd be your environmentals, it'd be your whether or not we can actually put it here or not, versus the outside group that was just saying, hey, this is probably your better way to go, this is the best way to go. So that's why I asked that question with the outside firms. Sometimes they don't see or it's more of that 30,000-foot level, not quite deep enough detail to be good factual. So, you know, how it builds, that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, and when we submitted our grant application, the strategy behind it was to have 50% of it in kind of that static, pull all the data that's available, but then the other half is private sector engagement, where you're out talking to industry and you're doing real polling and you're getting real data like market intelligence, because it can become a really good study project. And you know, I'm very much a private sector person, but you gotta have some rules of the road. So what I have seen just in my short time here at the city is that every time a new administration comes in, they've got new ideas, and there's a lot of squirrels and a lot of rabbit trails. That I think it's the best gift we can give is some kind of vision that has some reason why we're making decisions that we're making, and make the economic development a priority. We have conversations going on in our city right now that one person calls economic development and the other person calls it, and you could have two polarizing. So Tina and I talk about this a lot. Economic development to us is, okay, how much of a capital investment is it? How many jobs is it creating? And what's the payroll look like? If this is a good piece of commercial property, why are we gonna allow some construction that's gonna have 4 jobs annually and very little payroll? I mean, is that economic development? Because it gets confused with community development, which is equally important, but you gotta have a ratio or a balance there. Otherwise, you have everybody build your community. So at least it just provides us a way to get out into the public and get them engaged. So thanks for your support, and I'm very excited that we got the award.
Cool. Ms. Crawford?
I'll just piggyback on that just a little bit, and I'm not taking any of the credit. Crystal found the grant. She went out and pursued it. She had the dream child. My role in it, and that we've been struggling, and I'm excited to see as a planner, which ties in kind of sort of fragments off that parking conversation, is when we did the comp plan in 2012, it was a few years before I came on that they did a lot of the analysis. They hired a real marketing analysis firm to come in and identify, what do we currently have? What kind of infrastructure do we have? What kind of capacity do we have? What are the future demands? And you know, what's a reasonable plan for future economic growth? Meaning, I'm not going to explain it as well as she does, because she does economic development more than I do that particular piece. But what that plan or that analysis identified was the need for how many hotel rooms, how many medical offices, how much retail could this community with this population support with the infrastructure that we have, the roads, the power, the water, the sewer, all of that detailed analysis. And that's what we're hoping to get out of this plan, is so that when developers looking to come into the city, they can see, what kind of capacity do they have? What kind of deficiencies do they have? Will my business be a good fit here? What are the benefits of being in the city? So it's an economic tool. It's a future growth tool. I'm hoping we're going to get some really good information out of it that's actionable. Again, that's been one of the things that I was trying to, and I didn't write it from scratch. I took it from other people's RFPs, is make sure that we had measurable standards that we could hold the person that's preparing it to make sure that it's actually going to be a tool we can use versus a pretty book on a shelf. So we don't need any more books on our shelves. We need something that will actually help us in our future growth. And what's best for our community as determined by the community. So,
All right.
exciting times.
Commissioner comments?
No.
City Attorney, are you there still?
I'm still here. You can't get rid of me that easy.
Right.
No comments from me.
All right, thank you, sir. Commissioners, comments?
Please make sure SEDS includes an airport as part of the grand plan.
Let me tell you.
Thank you.
Tourism, airport, and commercial, right?
No comments.
No comment.
They're going to reorientate the airport, right, so they don't fly over my house anymore?
No.
I'm going to send more planes over your house.
We were actually
Helicopters.
we were actually talking about that the other day, because many years
Somebody
ago.
wants to put in a float plane armada out of
Well, actually, here's where I've been waiting to make this comment because I don't mind the commercial use of the lake, Lake Lucille. And I know it was banned for a while, and then it was put back in under a previous administration. Started with P, Palin administration. I believe they're the ones that got that changed over, but I don't really mind it. Except when Russ flies in with 13 of their aircraft and they taxi out and they have to take off right in front of my house. That's the lane because of the other airport. Does Russ Air have a business license in the city of Wasilla? And are they paying taxes on the tours that they originate from the Best Western Hotel?
You should ask the Best Western.
Because the tour buses are dropping them off at the dock and they're getting on the planes. And they're flying out and landing in Anchorage.
Say Rust as
It's Rust Air.
Rust.
Air.
RUST?
Their planes are rust red.
They're busy this weekend.
On a good day, though, good clear day, well, on a smoky day, they had 7 airplanes. I'm not sure what they were looking at because you couldn't see the mountains. but then last week, one day, they had 13. They'll run an otter. They had 3 beavers and a bunch of Cessnas. So they run out of there 5 to 6 days a week. They pick up over there.
Depends on the cruise ship.
Correct.
Docking. And
Yeah. So what they do is they'll send tours north, and as they're coming off the trains, they'll pick them up, probably Talkeetna, or they'll be driving them down, and then they bring them over. And usually it's around 1 o'clock. I was curious about that. Just kind of trying to have a phone conversation, and I had to go inside. About 15 planes all took off. Now, they're not as bad as some of my neighbors' planes that have these speed props that just, when they're empty. So, but that's all I have to say. So on that comment, it is 7:41, and we are adjourned.
I did 37 years on cotton.